Do you know how to devour a king? Not literally
Nom,
om
nom,
nom
nom.
nom him, but rather, how do you stop a powerful, dominant masculine force from wanting to continue on, ravaging his very soul, breaking him so thoroughly that he becomes a shell of himself, withering away in powerless exile or obscurity? Miyazaki knows, and he knows it well. He knows it so well that he wrote the same archetypal story 4 times across 2 games. Clearly, there was something major he wanted to communicate with this theme. While this story beat might show up in other Souls titles to some extent, there are 2 that prominently showcase this idea of great, powerful men being reduced to ineffectual, discarded husks after being used as a tool for their queen's ambitions. 2 games that share the same DNA in many aspects, in fact, as well as many other traces of lore and even some mechanics. Those games being Dark Souls 2 and Elden Ring. The same story plays out in both, where a king or ruler is commanded by a feminine figure to use his power to slay giants in some capacity. Specifically, giants that guard or hold the way to some form of divine transcendent power of change. But when the man completes that great feat, he doesn't feel the sweetness of victory. Instead, he shatters, he becomes depressed, and eventually he is sent into hiding by force or by will from the same feminine entity he gave his soul to accomplish that monumental task. Both games follow many similar thematic parallels, ranging from illusion to desire to truth. The story thread I'm planning to follow here, however, is a subtle but central conflict involving major characters that embody traits associated with the divine, idealized aspects of each gender, the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Please note that while I am discussing masculine and feminine throughout this video, I am not strictly referring to male and female as often understood by modern definitions of gender, but rather the extracted concepts and interpretations of gendered tendency and ideas as expressed frequently throughout alchemical, philosophical, and mythological understandings. Things like keys and locks, outward and inward, poles and holes. We getting the idea? We'll mainly follow the stories of King Vendrick of Drangleic and his queen Nashandra, the Fragment of Manus, and Godfrey, First Elden Lord and consort to Queen Marika, to see why the same mistake leads these great men to failure, their kingdoms to ruin, and themselves to exile. So grab a water, get comfortable, and let's figure out what keeps devouring these great kings. King Vendrick was the ruler of Drangleic. Maybe he still is, at least in my heart. Though the accounts given by just about everything in Dark Souls 2 are shaky on the best of days, we can generally surmise that he was trying to be a just and good ruler. Until, eventually, Nashandra happened. I mean that pretty literally. She came to Drangleic alone from a faraway land. The only real clue we have to how she got here is, like all disparities in Souls games, dark can't exist without light, and brighter lights cast the darkest shadows, so it seems to be suggested that Vendrick's immense power drew her towards him. Sometime following her arrival, she warned the king of giants across the sea, presumably implying that they had the power to destroy Drangleic if they ever got the mind to. Vendrick was overwhelmed by the dark, in the game's words, and followed her advice. He crossed the sea in a preemptive strike and slew countless giants, bringing many more back for the power of souls that they possessed. After this feat, he harnessed that power of souls, working alongside his brother, Aldia, to create golems that built Drangleic Castle. Yet, despite all these victories in battle and breakthroughs in metaphysical sciences, it says, his countenance darkened with each passing day. When the giants eventually returned with retribution, war broke out across Drangleic as the kingdom rallied its defenses against the retaliating invasion. Yet, the most renowned giant slayer among them, King Vendrick himself, was nowhere to be found, said to have disappeared as the war with the giants reached its ferocious peak. Nashandra, allegedly, when she heard her husband had disappeared, seemed completely unfazed. Again, we see this story play out in Elden Ring with Godfrey, the First Elden Lord. Long ago, he was Horalu, a warrior with immense prowess in combat, who became the consort to Queen Marika. In doing so, he submits to the fledgling Golden Order, his will becoming aligned with that of Marika and the Erd Tree. I always found the Shadow of the Erd Tree item, Talisman of Lord's Bestowal, interesting, as it plays on and hints at things relevant to this video, and that are the subject of another video entirely. The Lord accepted the sap, stoically, without any sign of wavering. No wonder Lord of the Erd Tree casts a long shadow over the lands. What is important is that his power and his will were submitted fully to Marika with this act. An interesting detail that evidences this is how Godfrey's colorations exhibit when his will has been consumed by the feminine of Marika, and when he is acting of his own accord. In all of the historical paintings depicting him in-game, and when you meet him for your final confrontation, his armor is a gleaming silver, with blue fabric draped around. Silver and blue are heavily associated with the alchemical stage of Albedo, the stage most clearly aligned with divinely feminine traits and ideals. In Phase 2, after Godfrey slays Serash, his color coding changes, chiefly to that of red, the color of Rubedo, and the stage of the divine masculine, drawing out ideas of power, self-determination, and the ability to enforce one's will upon the world. Hell, Godfrey is practically a single boss magnum opus speedrun. I'll talk about all these concepts another time in another video though. Anyways, some time after the founding of the Golden Order, Marika commands Godfrey to wage war with the last enemies of the Erd Tree, the Giants, to confine their flame. He does as he's asked, slaying giants and 1v1ing their leader, the Storm Lord, presumably at Castle Morn. But upon felling the second to last giant, he and every warrior in his army become tarnished, their grace of gold fading before they are exiled from the land as the true Age of the Erd Tree begins. In a sense, he and the Tarnished pave the way for their own irrelevance. Who needs a warrior king when there's no more enemies to war against? Godfrey and the Tarnished take up their long march out into the Badlands, where Godfrey gives up his lordship and becomes Horalu once more. So, what did Vendrick and Godfrey do wrong here? We can see both men, wise, powerful, caring, great warriors capable of slaying giants, be, ironically, defeated by their otherwise victory. Both of them, in the time they should be celebrating and celebrated, are characterized by the loss of something within them. There is one common denominator, the why of their conquest. We might be able to speculate or cope that they may have agreed to this for selfish reasons. Vendrick was already a great warrior who was able to vanquish the previous holders of the Lord Souls, and who was also able to use the giants in soul research he conducted with his brother, so maybe we could guess that he wanted either further glory or to help his brother's metaphysical research with some soul juice, but even then, it's unclear when the soul research began, before or after the conquest against the giants. Godfrey definitely gives no inclination towards being a scientist, unless we're going to count Monster Hunter style research by impromptu field dissections of beasts as science. But he did have battle prowess, as well as the respect from many troops that he commanded, and even the Crucible itself via his command of the Crucible Knights. Maybe nothing more than the glory of combat and conquest would be enough for him. But the effect it had on both of these kings says volumes. They didn't do this for themselves in any capacity, and their crusade was imposed on them by none other than their wife, their queen, their devouring feminine partner who commanded their strength in her service without a care for their wants, how it might affect them, or their subsequent banishment. In the end, Godfrey and Vendrick both achieved a hollow victory, devoid of any benefit to themselves. But worse yet, their victory opened the path for both of their wives to seize control over something more powerful than they may have realized, or realized far too late. A transcendental power over change itself. not so these women could integrate meaningful change into their vision of the lands that they ruled, but rather so they could smother, stagnate, and consume the idea of change itself. That moment right there is where the king dies. Because once the idea of change itself is surrendered to an overbearing, stubborn, unflinching vision of peace and order under the mythological concepts of femininity, the men who could enact meaningful change to that stable world that they were essential in building become not just irrelevant, but actively dangerous and threatening to that stability. Would it surprise you if I said this isn't the first time humanity has had a story about masculine principles conceding to feminine coded entities and everything falling apart? Well, there's a lot. And I mean a lot of mythos surrounding powerful men, giants, divine knowledge of change, and feminine figures or female coded vices, bringing it all to ruin. I'm just going to look at two to save myself from making another 75-minute video. Let's start at the beginning. Well, pretty close to in the beginning. Genesis 3 of the Good Book. Adam and Eve. The serpent tempts, Eve eats from the tree, then gives some to Adam, who is right there with her, and he also eats. He doesn't stop her, he doesn't fight the serpent, he sits idly by, then partakes of the divine power they were not supposed to have. Now we have taxes and Reddit. Thanks, Adam.
Adam!
Now, bounding far ahead in time to the dizzying modernity of 20th century BC ancient Mesopotamia, let's take a look at the king of heroes himself, Gilgamesh, and his good friend that was brought to him by the gods to stop his abuses of power and keep a level head on his shoulders, Enkidu. Yes, I am using these renditions of them, and you can't stop me. Gilgamesh ventures out of his kingdom, Uruk, with Enkidu to the cedar forest, thought to be the realm of the gods, to retrieve wood to build monuments that would give him everlasting fame, as legacy is often perceived as a form of immortality. Long story short, he and Enkidu trick the giant guardian of the cedar forest, Humbaba, into giving up his secret abilities that protect him. Then Gilgamesh punches the giant dude in the face. Then when he pleads for mercy, Enkidu, the one formed by the gods to be a stabilizing and rational force for Gilgamesh, straight ices him. Sometime after this, facing no consequences from the gods at all for killing their forest guardian and helping themselves to the sacred trees, the goddess Ishtar tries to demand Gilgamesh be her consort. He rejects her, pretty hard, so she throws a hissy fit and sends a bull of heaven to kill him. Of course, the ultimate duo isn't about to lose to some literal bull, so they kill it too, and let's see here. The rational one, Enkidu, taunts the goddess Ishtar by throwing the bull's severed right thigh at her. I believe the most accurate translation, provided by my good friend, would be, "And lo, the clay femboy doth yeeted the divine bull's right ass cheek at the goddess, declaring, Begone, thought." Word for word from the Sumerian cuneiform. Oh, and so Enkidu was stricken with illness by the gods as retribution, and he died. Womp womp. Gilgamesh is distraught by his friend's loss and spurned on to seek true corporeal immortality instead of this simple mimetic immortality like he sought with the wood from the cedar forest, only to find that no such thing exists. But this story sounds just like a couple of guys being dudes. Well, you may have noticed there's a tiny little detail in there. Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk. He spends years ignoring his kingship to fight giants and spite goddesses with his Twinkie clay femboy and cry and search for a secret to eternal life while he has responsibilities he should be doing. Oh, and if you're wondering who was the feminine coded catalyst for this similar story, let's break it down. Gilgamesh is an overly masculine king, aggressive, tyrannical, arrogant, and greedy. He sent Enkidu to chill him out a bit by the gods. But notably, Enkidu is a mirror of Gilgamesh, who starts out as male primality, described as a wild man, sound familiar? Who is civilized entirely by a female goddess. And yes, civilized is doing some very heavy lifting there. Anyways, Enkidu has no actual compass for integrated masculinity. He knows primality, then how to be a part of civilization exclusively through a goddess. Absolutely fatherless behavior, Enkidu. But moreover, the epic seems to progress from Enkidu losing his fight to Gilgamesh, praising his awesomeness, then Gil suggesting the two of them go run a fade on a giant guarding the backyard of the gods to honor his own greatness. One could plausibly suggest that Enkidu was, indeed, the catalyst for Gilgamesh's conquest to fight giants and seek out some form of divine power and immortality. Despite being a male, Enkidu is coded with feminine concepts throughout the epic and does the same conceptual role. He spurs the man to a fruitless, hollow action, leading him to forsaking his duty as he chases something imaginary instead of the true immortality that he already has, his kingdom. But how do all these stories connect with failures of kingship? In all of them, a man sits idly by or is complicit with the feminine force encouraging them to fight or strive for something related to divinity. Shortly after this, someone, or everyone, is cursed by something. Enkidu is cursed with illness, Adam and Eve curse all of humanity, the undead curse spreads faster through Drangleic, causing people to forget their purpose faster, and Marika removes the rune of death, creating a world where death isn't. All of these curses are, interestingly, a form of stagnation and a resistance to growth. Enkidu's death causes Gilgamesh to wander for years, neglecting his kingdom. Adam and Eve curse humanity to repeat the same cycles of rise and fall, progress and decay. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. Drangleic's undead curse causes people to forget things faster and more often, leading the kingdom to only really know how to maintain, but never how to create or grow. And the lands between, everyone loses meaning. Erdtree birth will simply see you cycle repeatedly through the world again and again. Yet, it's the looming threat of an end that creates drive and desire in people. For yearning, for longing, for meaning, for everything, really. Want, as is very thematic to Dark Souls 2, cannot exist without an end. Why does the curse start drawing in people and undead from outside Drangleic? Because everyone already there has forgotten what there is to fight for. Why did the Tarnished need to come back to sort out the lands between? Because they were familiar with meaning, with ending, and with death. Those born of the Erdtree had become complacent, hence why they just aimlessly wander the desolate roads. And why did the ancient immortal dragons need to be fought before Gwyn could start building the kingdom of Lordran? Because in their immortality, they had no reason to change anything or let anyone else change anything. These two great kings died the day they allowed a force that demanded stagnation to take the reins of their willpower. When they surrendered their divine masculinity as agents of change to an entity that hated change, they lost their ability to call themselves kings, for a king rules and dictates, and they were in control of nothing. Because when the power to change is lost, so too is the power to grow, to create, to find meaning in the things that you pursue, to dictate and interpret your will onto reality. So stop being afraid. Afraid to speak up, afraid to think, afraid to create. Take back your sovereignty of anything, be it an unhealthy relationship, an addiction, a negative perception of yourself that holds your divine power of change and growth hostage, demanding that after everything you've done, you sit there in isolation and wither away in silence. Because remember, if someone or something sees that you possess something and tries to break you to take it for themselves, that means you're already holding on to something powerful, something meaningful, and something that you've already had to slay your own giants to achieve. Hello everyone, and welcome to the end of the video. Once again, I am thrilled with the reception of my previous project, the Dark Souls 2 essay, and was absolutely delighted with the conversations I got to have with many of you in the comments about lore speculation, philosophy, and haunted pizzerias. But to this point, I want to ask, Where else, either in From Software titles or entirely different stories, have you seen this idea of stagnation or ruin following the surrender of masculine ideals? I'm eager to hear from everyone in the comments. The only other thing I would like to add is that I am full steam ahead already working on the next video, as halfway through this script I made another connection that seemed highly plausible. So consider this part 1 of 2 for a series dissecting how kings lose their kingship, because next time we're digging even deeper into a thematic thread that underpins this loss of masculine agency through 3 characters that track very closely to a mythological archetype and an uncomfortable truth about one of Elden Ring's endings. I'm sure as stone it'll be something worth gazing into the eyes of. Anyways, thank you for watching, you all rock, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.